What's up, everybody? The Fantasy Football Strategist here today. We're going to be doing a full 3 round mock draft with projected landing spots today. And this is going to be the first video in which we have our new co host, Bobby. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, what's going on, guys? Bobby here. I am a big time fan of the channel, so I've been working with him for a few weeks. We've been doing a lot of rookie breakdowns, gradings, and stuff like that. So we'll definitely be bringing a lot more content with the channel that way as well. But we wanted to bring this rookie mock draft to the table for you guys to look at. So I think you'll be surprised with where some of these guys land.
For sure. And so we've been doing a lot of film breakdowns, a lot of grading. And so we're going to see how our rankings ended up here in terms of a landing spot, whether or not, the order of picks in which we selected matched what our rankings were pre-draft. And so we're going to begin with a full 10-team mock draft. And it's going to be a Superflex, point 0.5 tight end premium. And so the first overall pick was Ashton Jeanty. And then so in this mock draft, he ended up going to the Dallas Cowboys in the first round. Obviously, this is a popular landing spot for Jeanty. A lot of mocks have him going here, and it would be quite the good landing spot, to be honest with you. So what do we like about his landing spot? Well, he would obviously be the most talented back by far there. They have other offensive weapons such as like CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, and while their offensive line isn't what it used to be, you could definitely do worse. And so as far as his skills are concerned, he is one of the most well-rounded, sure-thing running backs in this class. He has fantastic contact balance. He's a physical back. He's great out of the backfield in the receiving game. He's a decent route runner. His vision and run IQ are elite. He makes the most out of yards consistently. And then he also has the speed to have the home running hitting ability. And so overall, he is just, in my opinion, the clear-cut RB1, and I think consensus definitely agrees with that. As far as his production this season, it was ridiculous. And so he had 2,600 rushing yards, 30 total touchdowns, and 569 receiving yards this season, which is just ludicrous Heisman-winning level production. And he's definitely showed that he can hold up to large workloads, which we obviously prefer from our bell cow type backs. And so overall, this is just a beautiful pick. And if he does end up going to the Dallas Cowboys, I think the consensus is definitely going to be that he's the 101.
Yeah, I don't see how anybody else goes anywhere else. I think the 101's clear-cut Ashton Jeanty in the majority of leagues, especially with the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, they're very historically driven on giving their running backs 230-plus carries every year. So, yeah, I don't see anybody else going here at the 101. So at the 102, so we're kind of going back and forth here. So I went with Tet McMillan out of Arizona here. So I liked him a lot. I thought you could go quarterback here if you wanted. I think the quarterback class is just a little too. There's no really elite standout prospect for me, at least as far as the quarterbacks go. So I went with the surefire wide receiver out of Arizona here at the 102. We have him going 6th to the Raiders in the first round. So things that I love about Tet McMillan, obviously fantastic size, fantastic physicality. I know you compared him to Brandon Marshall, which I thought was a great comp. Obviously, people see a lot of Mike Evans in him. You know, he's a great yak threat. Very surprising for his size. Obviously, great contested catching ability. And I think the Raiders definitely have a lack of a number one receiver. I know Jakobi Meyers, he's an undrafted free agent guy, so I don't know how long he's going to stay there. But I know quarterback play isn't great right now in Las Vegas, but, I mean, they had Jakobi Meyers being a very fantasy-relevant player, and I think Tet McMillan is much better as a prospect than Jakobi Meyers is. So anything you want to add here about Tet?
Yeah, he's just about the full package. If he had truly elite deep speed, this guy would be an absolutely legendary prospect. The one good thing is, as far as the wide receiver competition, like you were mentioning, there really isn't any. Sure, he's going to have to contend with Brock Bowers, but somebody going this high in the first round to a team like the Raiders is going to command a decent target share.
For sure, for sure. So at the 103, who'd you end up going with? Okay, who'd you pick at the 103?
And so I know you'd mentioned that definitely quarterback could be in consideration here, but I actually ended up going with Trevion Henderson. So in this mock draft, he ended up going to the Raiders, which there's definitely better landing spots, but what does he have to deal with, right? And so he would definitely be getting the lion's share of the running back touches here. And so as far as his skills are concerned, he is one of the highest upside running backs. I think that in the right system, maybe not per se with the Raiders, you could definitely see Jameer Gibbs and Alvin Kamara like results in terms of the rushing and receiving production. And so, as far as his agility is concerned, it's absolutely breathtaking. His acceleration and deceleration are both tremendous as well, and he uses them both deceptively in tandem to completely destroy angles. If you're behind him, good luck because he also has home run hitting speed. And he actually has this ability to turn speed into power. And so while he's not, the big bruising back that uh, somebody like some of these guys we're going to be mentioning later are, he still does pack a punch. And he's also an underrated receiver as well. Um, I definitely could see him being used on wheel routes, obviously in the screen game, dump offs, and flats and such. But I do think that he has the theoretical ability to be lined up out wide too and be used vertically down the field. Now, will the Raiders do that? It remains to be seen. But I do think he has untapped potential as a receiver that he still hasn't shown us yet. Now, as far as his production is concerned, in 2024, he had 1,016 yards on only 144 carries while splitting time with Quinshon Judkins at The Ohio State University. He had multiple long touchdowns, and that is going to be something that translates in the NFL. One minor thing to mention here, though, is that there are potential injury concerns. He did miss some games in his sophomore and junior seasons, but nothing serious like, an ACL tear or anything with his neck or spine. And so there's definitely players that we'll mention a little bit later, potentially with more injury concerns. But that is something to mention with Henderson, and I think that is something that distinguishes Genty and him. Is I think Genty is more suited for a legitimate bell cow usage in the sense of receiving over 250 rush attempts and the full receiving work. But as far as Henderson is concerned, he is going to make up for that with extreme efficiency. He is going to be one of the most efficient backs the second he steps into the NFL.
Yeah, I think Trevion Henderson's definitely the highest upside running back in this year's draft. We saw it on film time and time again where, he's making these plays that most running backs are going to take 2 or 3 yards max. He's taking them 40 yards, like 40 yards to the house on some of these. His agility and his ability to just make something out of nothing consistently is probably the biggest thing that I like about him. So I hate that you get him at the 103, but he's definitely, me and him, Genty and Henderson are very close to me. So at the 104,
For reference, you actually took him right in front of me in our dynasty startup that we just did.
Yes, exactly. So at the 104, I don't think a QB should be going any lower than this, especially if you're in a super flex draft like this 10-team super flex. So I had to go Cam Ward. He's our QB1, so there's a lot to like about this kid. He's a fifth-year player, but with the theme of nowadays NFL, these fifth-year players are just coming in like Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels. They're coming in and being QB1s, right? So he has some of the biggest upsides for a quarterback that I've seen. He's making some ridiculous throws downfield, especially out of the pocket. And then he's got a lot of downsides as well where he can get out of the pocket and make a really dumb throw and throw it to a defender across his body. So it's definitely something that I worry about. But, I made a note that he could be a Patrick Mahomes type player. That's his upside. But then again, he could also be a Zach Wilson as well. So it's definitely a big risk taking him at the 104. But if he hits, I mean, he's going to be a special type of player. So things that I thought his arm was pretty good. I think it's good enough to be an NFL caliber starter. I thought his athleticism was decent, nothing super crazy, but I think he can extend plays at the next level. I mean, we see Mahomes running a 4.9 40 at the combine, and he's still able to extend plays very, very consistently at the next level. So he's definitely a great competitor. He's won a lot, especially in Miami. He had a great touchdown to interception ratio this year. He threw almost 40 touchdowns this year. So I like him a lot. I think he's going to have a lot of value if he goes out in the first couple weeks, especially dynasty value. If he goes out in the first couple weeks and throws, 3-4 touchdowns in those 2 games, his value is gonna skyrocket.
Sure. And I like the point that you mentioned earlier, where yes, we obviously prefer our prospects to be as young as possible. But one of the things that we did see, like you mentioned, is players like Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix, sometimes, and even Jalen Hurts a little bit ago, is that if you see an upward trajectory, that is a good sign that somebody could potentially hit at the NFL level. And like you mentioned, sure, the downside is potentially a Zach Wilson, but when you are able to draft a quarterback that has the upside to potentially be a Mahomes-like player,
Yep.
definitely shouldn't be falling any further than this pick.
I definitely agree. So at the 105, who do you end up going with here?
So at the 105, I ended up drafting Omarion Hampton. And so he is an early declare, which doesn't necessarily mean quite as much for running backs. Obviously, you prefer your guys to be younger, though.
Yep.
In this scenario, he ended up going to the Cleveland Browns, who coincidentally also ended up getting Cam Ward. And so that is part of the reason I liked Hampton here, besides receiving good second-round draft capital. And so what do we like about the spot? Well, unfortunately, while we all like Nick Chubb, probably washed, then the other running back competition is Jerome Ford. I don't think that's scaring anybody, really. And then, with a rookie quarterback, what are they probably going to want to do? Take the ball out of his hands, right? And so I definitely think that Hampton could receive a ton of volume here. Now, as far as his frame, he's give or take 6'1", 220 pounds. We haven't had the combine yet or his pro day, so we don't have official measurements yet, but on film, you can easily tell that he's going to have the build to be a bell cow back. And so obviously we like our backs who can receive the massive lion's share of the carries, as well as he's a very good receiver for somebody his size. I definitely think he's going to be seeing some receiving work. He has soft hands. And I think he has the lateral agility to potentially expand his route tree. But you're not going to mistake him for Alvin Kamara or McCaffrey or anything, so don't get that twisted. But he brings a good blend of contact balance, power, and vision, as well as his production. And so in 2024, he had his best season in terms of production. He had 1,660 rushing yards and 15 rushing touchdowns. And he also had 373 receiving yards on 38 receptions. So he was starting to be utilized more in the passing game, which obviously in today's NFL, you prefer your backs to be full 3-down backs. Now, as far as injury concerns, he didn't miss any time in college. And so besides receiving a ton of volume, he didn't miss time. And I think that is going to serve him well at the NFL level. You have any thoughts?
Yeah, he's definitely a pretty special type of player. This running back class is absolutely stacked. I know you compared him in your video to Josh Jacobs. I thought that's really, really good. Josh Jacobs isn't really that home run hitter, but super physical, a guy that's going to get you 4.5 to 5 yards a carry pretty much every year. So I think the Cleveland Browns, unfortunately with the Nick Chubb injury, he did not look very good this year. That could affect Hampton's production. Maybe they go with Chubb the first few weeks and then kind of lean on Hampton towards the middle and the later half of the year. But Hampton's definitely a definition of a 3-down back for sure, especially with his pass-catching upside. So I really do like this pick. So I went receiver with the 106. We'll see another receiver go here shortly that might be a little surprising, but I went Luther Burden out of Mizzou. So this kid is definitely special. We have him going late, I think 23rd overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the landing spot here is not my favorite. You know, we don't know what the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh is yet. We know that they're probably moving off of Russell Wilson. So are they going to stick with Fields? Are they going to bring in like an Aaron Rodgers or something like that? We don't know yet. But that will definitely that will raise his draft stock highly depending on who they end up getting in free agency or if they run with Fields. But, I mean, this kid's very special after the catch. You know, the speed's not super crazy with Burden, but he's probably not going to be an X either. But I see him as a Z, maybe a slot with tremendous upside as far as the yak ability. I mean, this kid's super shifty and can find the open space pretty much anywhere on a football field. So I think you compared him to Deebo Samuel, right? Where, I mean, you just find a way to get this kid the ball, whether you got to put him in the backfield, you put him in on end arounds, whatever you got to do, you get the kid the ball. And I think that's going to make him very, very valuable in fantasy. That's why we take him here at the 106. There's some limitations, though. Like I said, he's probably not going to stack vertically very often because of his, speed. But, I mean, with the mixture of his size and burst, I think he's definitely going to be a major hitter at the next level. So one other thing I think he's good with is, he's seen very, very high production in the past. I know his production this year wasn't that great, but the offense, if you watched any Missouri games this year, it was absolutely horrible, that offense. So Brady Cook was not playing up to standard at all. So I think if he can get in a solid offensive situation and they fix whatever's going on in Pittsburgh, he will be a great, great upside player at the next level.
Yeah, and to add on to what you just said, he was 27% of his team's receiving yards and 55% of his team's receiving touchdowns as a true junior. So once again, like you said, the counting stats weren't that special, but as far as his market share of the offense, he was by far the best piece there.
Yep.
And then another thing to add on top of what you were saying about his yak ability is, like you were saying, besides just being shifty and great in terms of the feel for open space and spatial awareness, he is a physical player that will also truck through you and break tackles.
Yep. So at the 107, a guy that we both love, I'll let you talk about him.
Yeah. So I am in love with this man, not going to lie. Mm-hmm. And so this is definitely going to be considered a reach to a lot of people. I personally could not care less if you paid me to. I think Jalen Royals is a special player. Now, in this mock draft, he ended up going in the third round to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so the draft capital in and of itself isn't special. But as far as the landing spot is concerned, it doesn't get much better. And so he definitely has an alpha, true number one wide receiver next to him in Brian Thomas Jr. I think we can all acknowledge that, right? But as far as Jalen Royals is concerned, he has absolute positional versatility. And so Brian Thomas isn't going to limit him from being on the field. And another thing we like is he's connected to somebody like, Trevor Lawrence, who got an actual upgrade this time at the coaching position in Liam Cohen. And Liam Cohen made Baker Mayfield a special quarterback. And now, while I like Baker Mayfield, I definitely think you could argue that Liam Cohen helped maximize his talent, much like Dave Canales did the year prior. And so, with Jalen Royals going here, once again, Brian Thomas is definitely good competition and probably is going to be the number one there. But there's a good chance that they get rid of Christian Kirk. They could potentially even get rid of Evan Ingram. And if both of those things happen, I really do think that Jalen Royals could receive a decent market share and hit right away as a rookie. And the long-term upside with an offensive-minded head coach like Liam Cohen, who has constantly maximized everybody. I mean, this guy made Will Levis a potential first-round quarterback. He was, he ended up going at the very top of the second round. Look, if he had not been with Liam Cohen in college, that was just not going to happen. And so, as far as his skills are concerned, definitely has the long speed to be able to stack vertically. You see it consistently on film. I think as an ex, I was a little bit concerned because I really didn't see anybody pressing him in college. And then uh, Bobby was nice enough to show me a play where during the Senior Bowl,
Senior Bowl, yeah.
he threw somebody on the ground that dared to press him. And then it started
Solid
to make a
corner,
little bit
too.
more sense. Yeah. It started to make, a little bit more sense why I just never saw it. And so when I graded him, I didn't ding him because I didn't really know if he could. Oh, he can. And so it's going to be a dangerous game if he's able to do that against NFL corners. But the thing that I really love about him, just like with Luther Burden, this guy is special after the catch. It can be deployed on tunnel screens, which you might not see at the NFL level quite as much, but bubble screens, you can use them in the short game on slants, shallow crosses, and the like. But like I said, he can also stack vertically down the field, and this guy is going to be a menace after the catch. And one other thing is, when he runs these curls, he looks just like Malik Neighbors in the sense of he will shiftily turn either left or right and head upfield immediately with ridiculous burst up the field. And the suddenness with which he snaps down on those curls really does remind me of Neighbors. And then on the tunnel screens that I saw, the way he's able to burst upfield really does remind me of Jamar Chase. Now, why isn't he one of these players? Well, in my opinion, he's just not quite that guy at the catch point, especially in contested catch situations. I did see a couple times where he was bumped off of his route with physical coverage down the field. And so he's probably not going to be that level of upside, but he is a very underrated player. And also, he runs a nasty slot fade if you want. And then one final thing is, he was a little bit of a late bloomer. He didn't really do much until his true junior season. But he did have 99 targets, 70 receptions, 1,084 receiving yards, and 15 touchdowns, which was awesome. Then this season, they started to move him into the slot a little bit, but he did end up getting hurt. But one thing to note is in 7 games, he ended up with 81 targets, 55 receptions, 839 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. Once again, that's in 7 games. So I am incredibly high on this player, and I can tell you right now, I will be making sure I end up with some Jalen Royals in all of my favorite dynasty leagues. You have anything more to mention?
Yeah, so I know another thing, Utah State, him being at Utah State's definitely going to hurt him because, it's a very small school. But like he said, in those 7 games, you go look at the production. He's going like 10 for 120, upwards of 200 yards. Versus Boise State, I think he had over 200 yards. So, he's proven that he can do this versus, college football playoff teams. So this kid is going to be something special. If he doesn't land at a terrible landing spot where they have no idea how to use him, he's going to be a problem. So he's definitely a guy that everyone here should be looking out for sure. So with the 108, first tight end off the board, I got Tyler Warren. I absolutely love this kid. He is fantastic. We have him going 14th overall to the Colts. Now, say what you want about that offense as far as its pass catchers go. I don't really care. I think he's that good. I think he's going to produce greatly at the next level. Obviously, the tight end one for me. I love his positional versatility. If you've watched any Penn State this year, you're seeing this guy lining up in the backfield, taking running back snaps. You're seeing him in line. You're seeing him out wide, in the slot. It doesn't matter. He's just everywhere. One thing that will really pop off on film with him is his ability to just maximize yardage. Now, he's not super shifty. Obviously, he's 6'6", I think 260 pounds. So he's definitely got the size for an NFL tight end. He's just so physical, man. He's so physical. Like, this guy is consistently shedding tackles, consistently trucking over guys, and getting maximum yardage that way. That's why I think he's a serious yak threat. Obviously dangerous anywhere on the field. And even at his size, he's got pretty solid speed. I think he's probably going to run a 4.7-ish for 6'6", 260, that's really, really good for a guy that size. So I know he's a little bit of a late bloomer. Like, he didn't do anything until his senior season. But, I mean, he was fantastic this year. I just don't see any tight end going before him. I really don't.
Yeah, and to add on to what you were saying about his positional versatility, he even played some quarterback. Is there anything this guy can't do?
He's fantastic, man.
Exactly. And if he makes it into the 20s, I will be shocked. I don't think there's any way he makes it into the 20s. And a tight end with this draft capital, with this type of positional versatility, who's also a yak threat, is somebody that you want on your team.
For sure. So then at the 109, who'd you go with here?
So I went with a little bit of an interesting pick here. I went with Caleb Johnson. So in this mock draft, and he's out of Iowa, by the way, he ends up going to the Los Angeles Chargers in the third round. So the draft capital, third round, isn't insane. It is where, historically it starts to get a little bit wishy-washy. But you could not really ask for a better landing spot than the Chargers. What does Jim Harbaugh like to do? Run, 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 run. Well, Caleb Johnson is the type of player that you can give the ball to over and over and over again. His build is give or take 6 foot, 225 pounds. Once again, with some of these other guys, we don't really have the numbers. And so he's a very physical player with good contact balance. One little criticism, nitpicky thing, is that with somebody like Omarion Hampton, for instance, he will truck through people with his contact balance, right, and physicality. With Caleb Johnson, it's more so like he's, a pinball in that he doesn't necessarily truck through people as much as, or as consistently, rather, as I would like. He kind of bounces off of people, and I think his high pad level has a lot to do with that, whereas somebody like Hampton runs with a lot lower pad level. And so one thing is that does invite injury concerns. I'm not particularly worried because he does have the build to be durable at the NFL level. One thing is he has very good vision and he has decent run IQ as well. But as far as receiving work goes, he doesn't really have the lateral agility, in my opinion, to be a tremendous route runner at the NFL level. He does have soft hands, so there's no concerns as far as that's, or there's no issues there. But I think he's going to be, more useful definitely as a runner of the football than a receiver. But, if he does go to the Chargers, he has Justin Herbert. They're going to be scoring a lot of points. And with, Harbaugh there, they're going to try to run the ball in the red zone too. As far as his production goes, he had 1,535 rushing yards and 21 touchdowns on 240 rush attempts. We do like that. But as far as the receiving work goes, he had 22 receptions for 190 receiving yards. He does have the ability to... He's a decent run after catch guy. You definitely see the running back that you see receiving handoffs after he catches the ball. Once again, the route running itself isn't going to be that great. Have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was that pad level, right? I think that's going to lead to perhaps some turnovers as far as fumbles go at the next level. But like you said, I mean, him and Omarion Hampton are very similar runners where they're going to maximize yardage, especially with some physicality. They're both super physical. So I do see him falling a little bit in the draft. I think Omarion Hampton's going to be more utilized, in the pass game, like we said. But I think he falls a little bit just because of that linearness as far as just, may not be a pass catcher at the next level. But yeah, I think he falls to the third round, and that's why he goes a little late here. I know some people have him as like their RB2, but he's our RB6 for us. So we definitely have some people up higher that y'all might see later on down the draft board. So for me, surprising, there's a name that hasn't gone off the board yet. I have Shedeur Sanders at the 110. So, obviously, like we said, we weren't super high on the quarterbacks in this class, and we went back and watched some more film on Shedeur Sanders, and after what we saw on the film the second go-round, I don't even know if I take him in the first round anymore. There's a lot of question marks with him. Obviously, the accuracy's great, and, we have him going to the New York Giants. in the first round. I think he goes. What? They pick at 2, right? They pick at 2.
They pick
No,
it
they pick at 3. They pick at 3. That's right. We have him going third overall to the Giants, which, yeah, it's a solid landing spot. You got Neighbors, you got the young Theo Johnson on the rise. You know, they might add another pass catcher in free agency or in the draft, right? So he'll have some weapons to work with, but there's just a lot of question marks with him, right? I think, he's got a very low ceiling, but he's got a high floor. And I make this joke all the time. I think his floor and his ceiling might be the same thing. So I know we compared him to Teddy Bridgewater, which isn't an insult. I think Teddy Bridgewater's a great player, but he's very linear, right? He's not going to be a rushing upside quarterback. He's going to need to be. He's just going to have a low a low ceiling when it comes to fantasy points every week, right? So, I think he'll be a game manager at the next level, right? I really think so. I think his arms around Cam Ward's maybe a little less, but definitely accurate. I don't really have problems with him in the intermediate areas of the field. Now, deep down the field was a little questionable, right? But, yeah, my biggest thing with him was the pocket presence, man. I saw it time after time. We saw it over and over on film where he would drift back like 5 extra steps in the pocket instead of stepping up in the pocket. And that makes life a living, it's terrible for your tackles. It's terrible for your tackles to block when you're 10 steps back, right? So I saw him take multiple 10, 15-yard sacks that were awful drive killers. I saw him run out of the pocket into sacks a lot. That's my biggest concerns with him, right? But like I said, if he can clean that up and be able to work within the pocket more consistently, I think he can be a 20 to 24 touchdown guy every year with 6-ish picks, maybe 35 to 3,800 yards. That's his ceiling, I think. And there's nothing wrong with that. And in Superflex leagues, you're definitely looking for that quarterback at all times. So, but then again, I don't know if he'd go at the 110 for me after what we know now.
Yeah, as far as as we're concerned, I'm very thankful he was drafting with me so that he went this high at least. Um, so yeah, it's isn't that we like I would love for him to succeed at the NFL level, right? We don't want any of these guys to bust. We don't have any issue with any of these guys. I just think that especially with the landing spot, like this is a very realistic landing spot, right? Your offensive line is bad to begin with,
No running
and with
game.
his tendency, like you mentioned, yeah, with his tendency, like you mentioned, to drift backwards and make his tackle's life difficult, this man is already working potentially with Evan Neal. I really don't know how much how this is gonna go,
Yeah.
man. But like we said, he does really have a decent floor. It's probably Teddy Bridgewater. It's just with this landing spot, the offensive line and his tendencies in the pocket, as well as his, he likes to play hero ball from time to time, which does lead to disaster.
Yeah.
Um, it's a risky profile, but definitely has a decently high floor, and you definitely wish him the best.
Yeah. Evan Neal being one of the worst tackles in football right now, that's definitely going to work to his detriment. I know we say he's the QB5 at the moment. He actually is our QB9 since we've done a lot more grading. So you'll see some extra videos coming out on quarterbacks that may be late round sleepers. So we're out of the first round. Who's your 201 here?
Oh, at the 201, I went with Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan. So, and now here he goes to the Chargers in the first round. You like the first round draft capital, just isn't Tyler Warren, just being honest with you.
Yeah.
But, he is a talented player. He definitely has his strengths. One of those being his positional versatility. On film, we saw him with some X ability, as well as being able to be utilized in the slot and in line. He's a very good route runner in the short and intermediate areas of the field. He has solid speed and acceleration. Now, the one thing that I think, like you mentioned earlier, really distinguishes Loveland from Warren, especially, is the yak ability, right? He's probably just going to get what's there. If he has open field in front of him, he's capable of running forwards, right? But he's just not as dynamic, and he's probably not breaking that many tackles. Now he is a decent blocker, which we definitely need from our tight ends. So they're so that they're not Kyle Pitts, right? So he definitely should be on the field a good majority of the time, especially being a first round pick. And if anything, that he went to Michigan, right? Jim Harbaugh was the coach at Michigan. He's going to like Loveland, and he's going to make sure that he is utilized in the passing game. And another thing that we like is, what do they really have besides Lad McConkey there? Quentin Johnston, he has strengths, uh, but he also has Justin Herbert, and that's what we really like.
Yeah.
One of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. Um, and so as far as its production, it isn't the best, but once again, to contextualize it, is at Michigan. They like to run, 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 run. And especially this season, they saw J.J. McCarthy head to the NFL. And so production isn't going to match what his talent really is.
Yeah, I don't see him going past the Chargers. I know it might be a kind of meta uh, landing spot for us just because of the Harbaugh link up again. But yeah, I mean, I see this kid. One of his greatest strengths to me is his jump ball ability. I think we saw multiple times on film where he was making these really impressive contested catches. Now, that's not super consistent, and we've also seen him make some boneheaded drops as well. But I do like his versatility. I think he's going to be a very big contributor on an offense for sure. So at the 202, this might be the most polarizing player in the entire draft for me. It's Isaiah Bond. I took him at the 202. Obviously, he's a wide receiver out of Texas. We have him going to the second round to the Washington Commanders. Very, very, very fun landing spot for me. So we watched film on Isaiah Bond here recently, and we saw a lot of really good things out of Bond. He ends up being our wide receiver 8. The first thing that jumps off on film is his speed. He's probably going to be a low to mid 4.2 guy. I'm thinking around 4.25 in the 40. I mean, this kid is a burner. But you see that, and you're like, okay, maybe he produces big at the next level, right? Like your Henry Bruggs is, your Xavier Worthy, stuff like that, John Ross, these burners that just produce at the next in college. He did not do that. He's got one game over 100 yards in his entire collegiate career, and he's a fourth-year player, I think. No, he's a third year. He's a true junior. He's got great athleticism, speed, acceleration, all of that, can separate downfield, but he just hasn't had big games. And we attribute that to partially Quinn Ewers this year, Jalen Milroe last year. We saw him, especially on his Alabama tape, we saw him get some posts overthrown 6-7 times that would have been clear-cut touchdowns for him, at least last year. And this year we saw a few of them as well. So it's a problem of just him getting overthrown or underthrown consistently. I see a lot. I think you had a stat about unrealized air yards maybe that you told me the other day. But I mean, this kid, if he, especially with Jaden Daniels, who actually knows how to throw a deep ball, he's going to be very, very, very high upside. On film, real quick about his route tree, I think he's got the best speed out of any receiver in this class, bar none. His posts, he gets separation there consistently. I saw him get consistent separation on a lot of these man-beating routes, like slants, like posts, like speed outs, zigs. I saw him run a few digs as well. His go routes are pretty good too, just because he's got great speed. Now his hands are a little questionable. We do see him drop things. He's not very physical at the catch point, but I don't know. I think this kid's just going to be really special at the next level if he can put it all together, fix the drops a little bit. He did have 4 drops in his last season on limited targets. So if he can clean that up and get some good quarterback play, I mean, this guy could go 10 plus touchdowns in the NFL easy.
Yeah, he is a threat to score from anywhere on the field. Make no mistake, he is going to be a dynamic threat at the NFL level. One thing is he does kind of get bumped off of his spot sometimes, but the thing about being a 4.2 speed guy is you're not necessarily going to find yourself in as many of those situations as you might if you're a little bit slower. And then if you go to a team with a quarterback like Jaden Daniels in this scenario, he's gonna give you a good deep ball, unlike he's ever probably seen in his entire collegiate career once. So there is definitely a ton of upside, but once again, with some of these guys with a little bit less production, it is a little bit riskier. But if this ends up happening as far as the landing spot, definitely want to end up taking him in the early second round.
Yeah, for sure. So at the 203, who'd you end up going with here?
So at the 203, I ended up going with Quinshon Judkins. Here he ends up going to the Chicago Bears out of The Ohio State University. So the thing is, the landing spot here is great. We like that in the sense of we like that Ben Johnson's the head coach, right? He said that he is going to build the offense around Caleb Williams and his strengths. I believe him. And as far as the receivers go, you have DJ Moore, you have Roma Dunze. As far as the tight end, you have Cole Kmet. The only issue is a player that doesn't necessarily create from nothing. And so I think that he would be best put in a place that already has a decent offensive line, or at least a serviceable one, because he's not going to create out of nothing. Now, if he ends up going to the Bears, they are projected to, first of all, invest in free agency. They've been rumored to be linked to Trey Smith, which would be a great signing, obviously. But then they're also linked to players like Will Campbell, who, despite his arm length or questions, definitely could be a very good guard, potentially even a Pro Bowl level guard. And so I do think they're going to actively look to beef up the interior of the offensive line and potentially left tackle too. We'll see about that. And so if those things end up happening and he ends up going to the Bears, I think there is a lot of touchdown upside with this guy. As far as his build, he's give or take 6 foot, 216 or 219 pounds. So that would be right around the 30.0 BMI that we typically look for in bell cow backs. I definitely think he could be a bell cow at the NFL level. He doesn't have the best long speed, but he does have very good burst. He's never afraid of contact. He wants to bully you, and so he will use physicality to his advantage. I could definitely see him being a workhorse back in terms of 3-down potential because he's decent in pass pro. But he's not per se a dynamic receiver, but I think he's once again serviceable enough to get it done. And so one thing about his production profile is he broke the SEC freshman rushing yards record. But his production decreased every single year. So maybe that isn't fair, because if you're taking away work from Henderson, you would have to be an insanely talented running back. But I don't mean that to be disrespectful to Judkins because he is a very good player. And I do think that in an offense like Chicago, with Ben Johnson at the helm, and Caleb Williams as well, that he does have a ton of upside. It's just, once again, important to note that he does probably need a decent or better offensive line to really be that effective at the NFL level, at least in my opinion. Have any thoughts, Dad?
Yeah, I think with him, like you said, he's going to be very reliant on the run blocking, right? I think he's very good at finding holes, but if the hole gets exploited or something like that, he can't just dip out like Henderson can and make something out of nothing. He will get tackled for a loss or short gain, right? Another thing to add, I don't know about Swift's stay there in Chicago long term, so we could see him being like the number 2 guy there, or them splitting carries like he did at Ohio State. So that's another reason why he's picked here. But obviously, I mean, look at the production. I mean, he's been over 1,000 yards pretty much every single year he's been in college. So the production's insane. So yeah, I think he's a very good pick here, and him falling at the 203 in your draft is definitely a good sign. You should probably take him. If he's anywhere farther than this, you should pick him up ASAP. So with the 204, another one of my guys that I love dearly is Jack Besh out of TCU. Uh, I got him going the third round to the Kansas City Chiefs. So this guy, we have him as our wide receiver 6. He could be even higher than that, in my opinion, especially after a Senior Bowl performance. He won Senior Bowl MVP. He's just really good. I mean, obviously the speed's not anything crazy. He'll probably run in the 4.5s, but he's got probably some of the best route running in the entire class, in my opinion. And the biggest strength for him is his jump ball ability. I don't know if he might have the best contested catch ability of any receiver in this draft class as well. Just good at everything, really. He's not going to beat you downfield as far as just burner speed, but he can separate vertically. I saw that on film. Just super good separator as well. I mean, he uses head fakes, manipulation. He'll use leverage on you. Anything that he needs to do to get open. He's a super good technician when it comes to route running. Might have the best releases in the class as well. Tet's kind of fighting with him for that one spot, but there's so much to like here, especially with the Chiefs landing spot. I love this landing spot. He can basically replace D-Hop if he chooses not to stay with that role. He'll definitely be an X at the next level or Z. He can line up in the slot too. I saw him in the slot a lot on film as well. But he can play basically anywhere on the field. I would want him to play X as well. So Mahomes can have some sort of a jump ball receiver to throw to. I see this guy getting immediate impact on the field. He might go in the third, he might go in the fourth. Regardless, any offense that he goes to, I think he will produce immediately. Now, as far as the production goes, he was an LSU transfer. He played a little bit of tight end at LSU for the first couple of years, wide receiver / tight end, and then he moved to TCU. And really, this is the first year of him producing. But yeah, I think he's fantastic. I know he's a fourth-year breakout guy, but I don't think that really matters. Just film doesn't lie, and I think he's going to be a fantastic player at the next level.
For sure. And, like you were saying, positional versatility, that is going to be his ticket to the field. He is obviously a hard worker. There really aren't any deficiencies to his game. He's at least decent to just about anything you could want. Like you said, he can stack vertically. And so if he were to go to Kansas City, he could fill any role that they need. And most importantly, like you mentioned, he could be the X.
Yeah. If he goes to the Chiefs, I wouldn't be surprised seeing him go late first, early second for sure. So at the 205, who do you end up going here?
At the 205, ended up going with Matthew Golden out of Texas. And so here he ends up going to the Houston Texans. As far as the landing spot, sure he's going to have to contend with Nico Collins. Look, he's not going to be the wide receiver 1 there. He's not going to be overtaking Nico Collins. Nico Collins is their vertical X. He is a very good talent at the NFL level. But as far as the number 2 option there, unfortunately for fantasy owners or fans of the Texans or Tank Dell, he's probably going to be out of commission for a while, and honestly, if he's the same player when he comes back. So I do think that they are going to try to invest in receivers so that CJ Stroud has somebody to throw to, especially, given some of the injury concerns that we've seen the past couple seasons with Nico Collins. And so as far as Golden is concerned, he has a decent amount of upside. I think he has pretty good speed. You're not going to confuse it with Isaiah Bond, to be honest with you, but he's still a very good receiver, and he definitely has the speed necessary to stack vertically downfield and separate. He is a little bit of a limited route runner, and a lot of his touchdowns on film did come on busted plays. But the thing is, he's good with the ball in his hands. And so I definitely think that they're going to try to get him the ball in space if he does end up going to the Texans. I think they're going to try to once again use Nico Collins vertically downfield. You can definitely get that role done. So I think that Matthew Gold can definitely eat underneath in the Texans' offense. But one thing is, he really didn't produce much until he was a junior. He had 987 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns as a true junior. Um, they didn't really have much production at Houston before transferring to Texas in 2024. Now, quarterback play, in my opinion, as we scouted their quarterback, definitely played a factor there. But what I will say is, when we were scouting their quarterback, Matthew Golden stood out on film. He was by far the most talented player I saw on that team. Not even remotely close. And so I definitely think that he has the potential to be a high upside player on a week to week basis. In this scenario, he's just not going to overtake Nico Collins. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so you may be asking, like, this is a first round receiver going behind multiple receivers that are going in the second and third round. I really think he's going to be overdrafted. I've seen so much hype for this guy coming out, right? And people were saying he's going to be a first round pick. He's projected to be a first round pick. So, I mean, honestly, I just don't see the talent there. He's really good at, once he gets the ball in his hands, he's really good, but it's just the route running's a little wonky for me. And that's why he's going to go in the second for me. I think he's probably going to go in the first in a lot of rookie drafts. I just don't believe in the talent, at least. I think the 205. I know you picked him at the 205, so we're kind of in the same boat with him. So I would let him fall. If you're sitting there at the 108, the 109, and you see Golden staring you in the face, I'd probably pass on him if it was me. So. And then another guy for the 206 for me, I got a Nika Ibuka going second round to the Titans. So this is a kind of a weird landing spot for me because I think me and you both agree that he's one of the more NFL ready players coming out, right? But he's going to be slot specific. It's not. I don't know if he plays anything else at the NFL level. I think he's going to be specifically slot. Maybe 10% or less out wide, probably playing the Z. But the Titans landing spot's definitely tough because when it comes to history, right, like we haven't seen any Tennessee wide receiver really do much of anything fantasy-wise in a while. I mean, Calvin really did okay this year, but outside of that,
Brown.
A.J. Brown, and that was, but I mean, he's just so good. He's going to do well anywhere. But the QB situation's kind of weird. Will Levis, Mason Rudolph, do they get a guy, in the draft? I don't think so. They probably go Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. We have Travis Hunter going there with the 1. So we'll see how that goes, but that's why he kind of falls a little bit here to the 206. But I mean, I love his route running, especially in the short to medium areas of the field. I think he's got really great yak ability. He can make people miss pretty consistently, right? I think his short area quickness is really good. Super twitchy route runners, too. I know I said Betch might have some of the best route running in the class, and with Tet, but Ibuka also, he's definitely up there. He's got an argument for one of the best route runners in the class, for sure. Now, he's had some big seasons at Ohio State, specifically as a sophomore, and then he kind of dipped off, at this junior season. He's a senior, right? Yeah. So, obviously, his production's going to go down because he's competing with one of the greatest wide receivers I think I've ever seen in Jeremiah Smith. I mean, that kid's incredible. So obviously his production's going to go down a little bit from there. But I mean, I like his value at the 206. I can see him going in the early second as well. If you really like if you truly believe in Tennessee Titans' ability to produce a wide receiver in fantasy. but I think the 206 is right around where I'd probably be taking him. What do you think about Emeka Egbuka?
So I think the word technician comes to mind with him.
Sure.
His understanding of leverage is incredible. He has really good route running, snappy suddenness. One other route that we need to mention is he is very good on the deep crosser, which he doesn't necessarily. Reports about his speed are a little bit vary. Um, I don't think he's going to be. I don't think he's a burner. But I do think that horizontally down the field he can separate.
Like a mid four
And I
fours
like
guy,
him.
huh?
Yeah, I've heard 4 3s from some people. I don't see that personally. But I liken his game a little bit to Chris Olave, where he's not the yak guy, which I think also, besides the landing spot of the Titans, kind of factors for us personally. Um, but a very high floor receiver who is very technically sound. Um, and I do think that while he doesn't have the elite long speed, I still think that he is going to be a very useful asset to us, even if, like you said, he is a little bit slot specific.
Sweet. So at the 207, who you got?
So at the 207, I ended up taking Trey Harris. So he goes 44th overall in the second round to the Dallas Cowboys. So, thing about him, he has very high highs. He definitely has some strengths. Um, he makes some insane catches. Now, the thing is, I think he's more of your linear boundary receiver. I don't think uh, he's definitely, I can tell you he's not a Z, right? Um, on film, we didn't really see much more than hitches, go routes, and comebacks. But now, he does run the linear plane quite well, so I don't want to take anything away from him in the sense of he is very good at what he was asked to do. Now, does that mean that that's all he's capable of? I don't think so per se. I don't like to typically say that people can't do stuff when I just didn't see them do it. Uh, but I do think that he's going to be more of your DK Metcalf plan type of receiver. But I don't think that he's the athlete by any stretch of the imagination that DK Metcalf was coming out. But I definitely liken that for the projected role for him coming out. As far as the landing spot, once again, to the Dallas Cowboys, they already have CD Lamb. And I think that this would allow CD to really excel in the slot, having your boundary, jump ball, downfield, crazy catch receiver like Trey Harris. And it could potentially, it's probably honestly not going to take very much coverage away from CD Lamb. But that could help Trey Harris, which obviously, if you're drafting him for fantasy, you care about. Now, the speed was good. It was decent, but not special. And he really wasn't able to separate and stack downfield as much as you would prefer from a vertical X type of receiver. But once again, I have definitely seen worse profiles. As far as his production, he had 3 solid years of production in 2022 with LA Tech, in 2023 and 24 with Ole Miss. He had almost 3,000 receiving yards and 35 receiving touchdowns. He did play hurt this year, but he still had decent production. And I will say on a couple of stats, such as yards per out run, especially, his stats are outliers compared to anyone else in the class. I'm serious; they are tremendous. So if you're somebody that doesn't really look at the film and you just take a look at some of these advanced stats, you would be questioning us based off of that. But I think the film marrying that with the advanced stats, I think it's a better picture about all of these prospects, to be honest with you. And make no mistake, he definitely has some upside. I just think that he's a little bit more limited to the boundary, and he's not per se your yak guy. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think this guy is going to consistently go towards the end of the first, top of the second in rookie drafts, and we just don't see that on film. I don't know. I think the route tree is really linear, and we've been breaking down a lot of data as far as receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, and tight ends, and we found that if you're vertical X, your average fantasy production is not going to be as good as somebody that's versatile or slot dependent. So I kind of steer away from your linear vertical X receivers just because they're so up and down and inconsistent for the most part. So, and it was so annoying on film. All we saw was hitches, comebacks, and goes. That's literally all we saw. So that's not saying that he can't run anything else. That's just what Ole Miss told him to do. And the Ole Miss offense, if you are a fan of Ole Miss or you watched Ole Miss this year, it's kind of a gimmicky offense, right? It's a lot of bubble screens, hitches, stuff like that. So with all that being said, I think this is where I would value him if I was in a rookie draft to 207 for sure. I probably wouldn't draft him anywhere higher than the 205. Oh, baby. So the 208, I'm going to hype my guy up here. I think me and you both love this guy so very much. I took Jordan James, running back out of Oregon. I know you already did the video on this guy. We have him as our RB3, and he goes in the 4th round to the Minnesota Vikings. So, where do I start with Jordan James, man? So we watched, because we did Dylan Gabriel's film analysis, we did Tez Johnson, and we did Jordan James, and we did a lot of different games. So we ended up watching 10 to 12 games, maybe even more, and we got to, every time we were watching Tez Johnson or Dylan Gabriel, we just get distracted by how good Jordan James is as a player every time. If he gets higher draft capital, obviously he's not going to go in the first or second, but if he did, I would really be hesitant drafting him anywhere below the 105. He is that good. Where do I start? He doesn't get tackled for loss. I don't know if we saw that at all. I think we saw one case where he just got obliterated by 3 tackles, 3D tackles. But that was it. I mean, he did not get tackled for loss at all. His acceleration and his burst are probably at the top of the class for me. He's got a great mixture of agility, like as far as his jump cuts go, and power as well. So I see him putting the pads down and lowering his shoulder to get consistent extra yardage every time he gets the ball. He has solid hands for a running back as well. And another thing, like his speed is not anything to, take lightly. I think he's going to run probably a low to mid 4.4 40. And I know a lot of people are like, we don't see that on film as far as, because he doesn't have the opportunity to show it. I mean, he's getting like shoestring tackled and stuff like that on these plays where he's consistently going to go to the house. And I think if he can break one in open space at the next level, he will take it to the house, and I genuinely believe that. As a junior, he's been very, very good, 1,200 yards, 15 touchdowns, and last year on limited usage, I think he averaged over 7 yards a carry as well, with 700 yards and 11 touchdowns as a sophomore. So there's so much to like with him. And, with the Vikings, I don't know if he don't just take Aaron Jones' job by week 5.
It would not shock me in any way, shape, or form. And I must say, one other thing is he has a nose for the end zone.
Yes.
Did we see maybe more than 1 or 2 within the 3-yard line carries that didn't result in touchdowns? Did we see any, really?
I didn't see that. I didn't see that very often of him getting stopped. And if he did get stopped, guess what Oregon was doing? They were running it right up the gut, right? I don't want to say he's like as physical as Omarion Hampton and Caleb Johnson, but he will do it on the goal line if he needs to. And he'll find consistent holes. I know he's on Oregon. That's just a really good team with great talent. But, we also saw him make something from nothing as well, just finding holes that aren't there. I think that vision of his is just really, really good. We may want to move on because I can talk about this kid for an hour and a half, man.
One last thing I want to mention is that while he doesn't have the initial power, Once he gets going,
Oh,
he definitely displays
yes.
speed to power. There was this one reception where he got going in a straight line and he
Oh,
smacked.
yes.
I believe it was a cornerback, and you could tell the cornerback was not very happy.
Yeah, and the play where he stiff armed the guy like 5 yards out of bounds as well. Like he's got so many of those plays where you're like, wow, he's really good. So I don't know why people aren't higher on this guy. I'm not. I'm very surprised. So at the
System.
209, who do you have at the 209?
So at the 209, we went with Cam Scatabo.
Yeah.
So what do we like about him? Well, specific to the landing spot, Patriots, right? They have their, at least potential franchise quarterback in Drake May. Some people are a little bit higher than others on him. I definitely think that he showed some good, and he was in a terrible situation, man. Um, Now, as far as the running back competition, it's pretty laughable to be honest with you. Ramondre Stevenson is scaring nobody, even though they extended him. They tried to bench him twice last year. The only issue was, what did they have behind him? Antonio Gibson. Right. So, as far as the running back touch competition goes, there really isn't any. He has a quarterback. They do have Josh McDaniels there. So, say what you want about him as a head coach. I think that he is a fine offensive coordinator. Not special per se, but uh, what do we like about him specifically, though? Well, he is a power back, and he is going to have the build necessary to receive a lion's share of the carries. I don't know his exact measurables, but he is definitely going to have over a 30.0 BMI for sure.
I think you should be around that 5'9", 215, 220 range, if I'm not mistaken.
Which would give him over a 32 BMI. It would be relatively similar to that of Jonathan Taylor, even though they're not per se the same build. Um, as far as one other thing is, he is an incredible receiver. You wouldn't think maybe somebody with his build would be a receiver at in college, and so one other thing about him is he actually had the most catches and receiving yards out of all eligible running backs. So not only does he have the BMI and the workhorse ability in terms of his size, he has the receiving upside too. As far as his production, he had 1,711 yards and 21 touchdowns as a senior, with 605 receiving yards and three more receiving touchdowns. And definitely had a couple of solid seasons at San Jose State, but obviously this was his best season, and he definitely has the ability to completely dominate a backfield.
So with him, I mean, they didn't have a lot going for them at Arizona State this year. I'm a Mississippi State fan, and we were projected to beat them early on in the season when we played them at home. And Cam Scatabo just destroyed us. I mean, and I've been watching him ever since. And he's been slowly creeping up draft boards. I mean, he took them deep into the college football playoff and took Texas into overtime, where he won the MVP. Even though Arizona State lost, he won MVP for that game because he had like 40 carries that game and was just doing crazy things. And like you said,
too.
Yes, passes. And he led all running backs in 2024 in catches and yards, I believe. So, I don't know why he catches so many footballs, but he definitely does. And, I don't know if he takes the passing game work from Antonio Gibson, if he's even there next year. I think he is. But I think he's definitely going to be the workhorse for New England. He might take him a few games, maybe halfway through the season until he starts getting a lot of workload, because I know Ramondre's there long term, even though he probably shouldn't. But yeah, I love this landing spot for him. So let's see. For me, at the 210, I went with Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. Having him go, I think, mid-second round to the Las Vegas Raiders. So there's a lot to like about Jalen Milroe, specifically, the speed and athleticism, right? Probably the best out of the class. Um, and obviously at the Raiders, he could very well start the season as the starter. He could beat out Minshew and AOC if he performs well in camp. Now, he's got great upside, obviously, with one of the better arms in the class. Um, but there's a lot of question marks, right? I think his deep ball looks really good, but is very inconsistent. Like we said with Isaiah Bond, he can underthrow, overthrow. The accuracy is a little iffy. Um, but his vertical speed is great. He's probably going to run in the 4.4s. But I've noticed that when he's running out of the pocket and the lateral agility, it's not really there at that point. So I think if you're going to want to run him consistently, you're going to want to run him at the QB zones, QB power, stuff like that to get his running, his athleticism going. In 2023, if he would have came out in 2023, I know the draft class in 2023 was absolutely bonkers, but I mean, he probably would have had a better draft capital, probably back half of the first round, than it would be this year, because he did struggle a little bit this year. He had a lot of rushing touchdowns, but the passer, he just kind of regressed as a passer with Saban not under the helm at Alabama. So he did regress a little bit, so he might even fall to the third. I know the Senior Bowl performance with him wasn't particularly great, so we'll see. I think he's fallen as well. I think he's our QB 7 or 8 now instead of QB 4. So we'll see. But you got to take him at the 210 with the upside, right? If he ends up putting it together, I mean, he can be a super, super great quarterback at the next level.
Yeah, so, obviously there's the rushing upside, and it would be great if he ends up hitting. One other thing I would mention is his hand size is really, really small.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
And so, in cold weather, for instance, that could potentially be a detriment. Obviously, with somebody like Michael Penix, for instance, right, he has, I believe, 100th percentile hand size. And so it's going to help, get more control of the football when you're throwing it deep. So that is a potential concern for him, and I do think NFL teams might be concerned about that as well. Besides, like you mentioned, that as a passer, at least from what we saw, he definitely regressed, and you did see it statistically as well. But the one thing, with this landing spot is, who do they have? Aiden O'Connell.
Nobody. Yeah, exactly.
So he definitely, in this scenario, does have a chance at some upside because remember, they have Brock Bowers, but in this draft, or in this mock rather, we also have them getting Tet and Travion Henderson. So with an injection of youth around him in terms of skill position talent, there would be the potential for some upside. It's just, once again, with second round draft capital, nothing is guaranteed for you.
Sure. So at the first pick in the third round, who did you go with?
I went with a personal favorite of mine, actually.
Both of
Evan
ours.
Neal out of Kansas. And so in this mock draft, he goes in the third round to the Cincinnati Bengals. So one thing about Devin Neal, I love this man. His vision, in my opinion, it's definitely top 3. You could argue it is the best in the class. There are players you could argue, but Devin Neal's vision is absolutely incredible. He rarely misses running lanes. He also has great to elite burst, somewhere in that range. But one thing he does lack is the long speed to house runs. But he marries his elite burst and vision together. He reminds me so much of Le'Veon Bell running the football, man. The patience that he displays. Just watch some film on him. You will see Le'Veon Bell in action. Now, he's maybe not quite the receiver that Lev Bell was, at least at the NFL level, but I definitely think that he could be used there. He's a creative runner, and even when the run blocking isn't optimal, he will create himself, and he is constantly maximizing yardage. I think he is one of the best runners of the football in this class, and in this scenario where he goes to the Cincinnati Bengals, who do they have in front of him? Zach Moss, I don't think that's scaring anybody. They did sign him, but he looked terrible and got hurt last year. And then Chase Brown, while Chase Brown put up some good fantasy performances, if you really look at the advanced stats and watch him, he's nothing special. And I believe he was a fifth round pick by them, so the team investment would not be on Brown's side either. I really think in this scenario that Devin Neal could take over this backfield. Chase Brown could see some passing down work for sure, but I do think that Neal is decent enough in pass pro and as a receiver to potentially be a three down back. And as far as his production goes, it's great. He had consistent workhorse production, including three straight 1,000 plus yard seasons, and he was always around the 6.0 yards per carry mark with back to back seasons of 16 rushing touchdowns. And he had 4,343 yards, 49 touchdowns on the ground in 4 years at Kansas. So the production does match what we see from him on film. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, he's fantastic. Obviously, if he was a better athlete, he'd be going in the first round of pretty much every rookie draft. Uh, Unfortunately, the physicality's not really there. He will get tackled fairly easily, but I mean, he's gonna if he gets the Bengals and he goes there and they give him some wide open running lanes. I mean, he's going to be a problem because when you play the Bengals, you're worried about the pass. He's going to be in there. He's going to be a early contributor for sure because I think we both don't really believe in Chase Brown that much. So he's definitely a great pick and probably a steal if he's there in the third round. So at the 302, I got one of my favorite wide receivers outside of Jack Besh in this class, Tez Johnson out of Oregon. Having him going fourth round to the New York Jets. I think that's a great landing spot. I know the QB question is going to be a little weird. Who's going to be their quarterback? This kid is fantastic. The only problem, and the biggest issue that everybody's going to have, is he is 5'10" ish. Might be a little shorter. I think he'll be around the 5'10" range. 160 pounds. So if we look historically, that is not good at the NFL level. Now, here lately, we've seen people like Xavier Worthy and Tank Dell produce at the next level around that size. They were both slightly bigger than Tez Johnson. Now, why are we talking about him if that's the case? Because he's an electric receiver. That's why. He's going to be in probably the low 4.3 speeds for his 40, and it shows up on film all the time. You watch film on this guy, you're going to see him consistently get open all the time. Speed outs, shallow crosses, anything that he runs, and especially his deep routes as well. I mean, he's got some of the better releases in the class, consistently gets separation everywhere. So at Troy, he had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. No, back-to-back 700-yard seasons. And at Oregon, he had over 2,000 yards over his last two seasons. And if he goes to the Jets, where you have somebody like Garrett Wilson, if they don't trade him, he's going to be their slot guy. I think he's going to be slot specific, but I mean, I've seen him at Oregon be used a little bit everywhere. I think he's going to be slot specific, play a little bit of Z, but if he can get on a team that utilizes him correctly, puts him in motion like they do Worthy, to where he doesn't just get blasted, because I did see on tape from time to time, especially at the Senior Bowl, I think there was a rep where he got absolutely destroyed in press. So he's going to need to be in motion and not be worried about press and stuff consistently. And if he can get out in open field, he's a problem. I mean, he's super elusive as well after the catch. So he's definitely a sleeper for me in the third round.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned Tank Dell earlier. I see so much Tank Dell in him. He just glides all over the field. His route running is so smooth. He's such a good separator. And then, like you also mentioned, he has electric speed. It also kind of reminds me of Deshaun Jackson. And in my opinion, he's some kind of combination of these two guys. But once again, and while that sounds really exciting, and it should be because, that's awesome, like we said, he's probably a little bit more limited just due to his size and some of these other more prototypical size receivers. But in today's NFL, what are coaches trying to do? They're trying to get their playmakers the ball in space. And in space, this guy is dangerous.
Absolutely. So at the 303, who do you got?
And so at the 303, ended up taking Jalen Noel out of Iowa State. And so here he goes to the Rams. What do we like about that? Well, they have announced that they're trading Cooper Kupp. So, that's one big piece of target competition probably going, right? Um, there have been talks about potentially at least Stafford being traded. And so if he doesn't have a quarterback, obviously that's disconcerting. But he also has to deal with Puka Nacua, who is probably going to just be the dominant number one wide receiver. Say what you want about his athleticism. He is very talented, and he is everything the Rams want in a wide receiver one. Physical, good after the catch, willing to do whatever, and he has positional versatility, rather. But as far as Jalen Noel goes, he's a solid route runner with great short area speed. He can line up theoretically anywhere on the field, but I do think that he's better used in the slot. He has solid long speed, but I wouldn't say it's like Tez Johnson's per se with that 4.3. Um, but he's not, elite at any one given thing, I wouldn't say, but he's a relatively well-rounded receiver, which the Rams, once again, that's something that they like, is they like somebody that can do a little bit of everything. Um, as far as his production goes, he had 1,194 and 8 touchdowns as a senior in 2024, and in 2023, he had 820 yards and 7 touchdowns. And so the production isn't per se, elite top shelf, but it's not as if he was a fifth-year breakout or anything. And once again, as far as the fit goes here, he, once again, can be put just about anywhere on the field. Rams like guys with positional versatility, and I do think that if they don't trade Matt Stafford, this guy would make a really solid wide receiver too for the Rams. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, so people are going to be more. Usually, people are going to be higher on his teammate, Jaden Higgins. We watched both of these guys pretty extensively, and I think Noel's definitely going to be more utilized at the next level. Like I said earlier, with your vertical X limited guys like that, you're not going to have much consistent fantasy production, at least from the past 10 years of every drafted player over the past 10 years. That's the data we've been looking at. We don't see consistent production out of your vertical X receivers, right? And your slot guys are getting a lot better production here as of late. So that's why we go with Noel. We also think he's the better player as well. So that's why I know a lot of people are higher on Higgins, but that's why we went Noel first. So for me, the next pick is Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green. So tight end out of Bowling Green. He's going third round here to the Houston Texans. And, the Texans do need a tight end. I don't know how long Dalton Schultz is going to be on the Texans. I really don't. He was not very good this year. And there's a lot of things to like. If you're not aware of Harold Fannin Jr. yet, I would definitely try to go watch some highlights. You're not going to find much film unless you're really looking on this guy, because he plays at Bowling Green, which is a super small school, right? So what's there to like about him? I think he's the best athlete in the class as far as, speed, yak ability, stuff like that. Not as physical as like Tyler Warren or something, but definitely great athlete with the ball in his hands. Thought he had some really good route running. I know he runs a little wonky when we saw the film on him. He's kind of runs kind of like he's just like a giant. And he's not super big either. He's like 6'3", 220, something like that.
Really upright.
Yeah, he runs really high, which we thought was kind of weird, but it didn't matter because on film he was getting open. It's not like he was playing bums either. I think he went over 100 yards in a touchdown against Oregon as well. So they were close to national championship game appearance right this year. So Now, I think he's pretty good at the catch point. Run blocking is a little suspect, but I think you're definitely going to use him as more of a receiving tight end, kind of like how Kyle Pitts is used. But he's a little undersized. That's the biggest knock on him right now. But he led all pass catchers in college this year in yards. He had 1,500 yards as a tight end at Bowling Green, which is insane. He also led all tight ends in touchdowns as well with 10. But that's the biggest question. He's a small school guy. Is that going to translate to the next level? And he's undersized, so that might affect the amount of volume he gets in a game. Because if you are the Texans, I don't see how you're not going to let Schultz out there, especially during run plays. And that could translate to be a liability as well. Like, if this guy just can't block at the next level, that's going to be a big problem because as soon as he's on the field, you know it's a pass play. The defenses will. So, what do you think about old Harold Fannin Jr.?
So I think, like you said, he runs a little bit wonky, but it worked. I will say one thing to add on is that he has the ability with his route running to run double moves.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, exactly. Like you were saying, and we saw that at the Senior Bowl practice in particular with the one-on-one reps. Now, in this scenario, right, we did see Houston take Golden as their wide receiver 2. Like you mentioned, he does have tight end competition, and it's they signed Dalton Schultz, so they're also paying him. So with that, along with Nico Collins being the number 1 vertical X on this team, target competition is something to question here. But you don't just walk into 1,500 receiving yards at the collegiate level as a tight end by mistake.
Yeah.
This guy is a baller, and if he is utilized, and he's also very good in motion too, one player comp is we kind of likened him to a less athletic David Njoku in Evan Ingram's body, if that makes sense. I think he's going to be pretty good. It's just he might be a little bit more landing spot dependent and need to work with a coach that might work around his potential limitations in the run.
Yeah, for sure. So at the 305, who'd you end up going?
I'm taking the baller out of The Ohio State University, Will Howard.
Yes, sir.
And so here he goes in the 4th round to the Titans. They did recently, in 2023, use high 2nd round draft capital on Will Levis. There have been some highs, but the inconsistency is a bit maddening. And man, are some of these turnovers dreadful, I guess is the word. So the quarterback play has been inconsistent with him. And then they also have Mason Rudolph, who, just being honest, isn't the long-term answer for them. And so I think that, with most fourth round quarterbacks, rather, the chance of them even getting playing time is basically nothing. But in this scenario, I do think that Will Howard is probably the most talented quarterback on this team right away. At least that's my opinion. And I do think that he could seize the opportunity and not let go if he were to see the field. As far as what do we like about him in particular, well, his fundamentals potentially are the best in the class. Now, say what you will about the class in general, but there are players that we are really high on, like Cam Ward, for instance. He has very good footwork in particular, and he's a very consistent passer. But his deep balls were a little bit underwhelming at times. Now, the thing is, we also projected Eke Egbuka to go to the Titans here. And now, if that were to happen, I think that Will Howard would absolutely be able to feed him early and often in the short to intermediate area of the field. He's also a solid athlete, and there was a rumor going around, right, that I believe he had reached speeds of about 22 miles per hour as a runner of the football. And so one comp for him actually was a Josh Allen light type of player, stylistically at least. Not a perfect comparison. Nobody's saying that he's NFL Josh Allen right away, right? Or, he'd probably be a first overall pick, right? But we did see quarterback power run with him at the collegiate level, and I do think in short yardage situations and around the goal line, that if he does get the opportunity, he is probably going to be converting those as well because he did look pretty good and he was pretty efficient in college. As far as his production goes, he had 4,003 passing yards, 35 touchdowns to 10 interceptions this past season. He also had 328 rushing yards. Remember that sacks are yards are deducted for sacks from that total. With 7 rushing touchdowns this season. And so I do think that once again, if he went to the Titans, I think he could instantly, potentially at least, be the best quarterback that they have on that roster. And if he were to seize the starting job, I don't think he would really cede it. You have anything to add?
Yeah, I know one thing that we really liked about Will Howard was that he resets after every read. So you kind of see exactly when he goes off, okay, that's not the right read, that's not the right read, that's not the right read, check count. And he does that really fast. You know, I say what you on time, all the time. That's why you mentioned the footwork. That is just, he's never really throwing inaccurate balls in the short to intermediate parts of the field. The deep ball is the part where it's a little wonky. Who cares? At the NFL level, if you want to dink and dunk, we've seen guys that can dink and dunk. Mahomes did it all year last year. All year. He dinked and dunked all year and was a very, very productive quarterback last year. Not perfect, but, I mean, if you want to do that at the next level, it will be effective. And with him, I mean, he's very, very consistent at it. Obviously, at Ohio State, he's got great weapons all around him. And at the Titans, he may not have that many weapons. You get linked up with your buddy Ibuka already, though, which is kind of cool. But, yeah, I love this guy. I really think he can do something at the next level. It's just a fourth-round draft capital. He could have a hard time seeing the field. And he could see, if he does get to the field and has a bad game, they could move off of him really quickly. And that's kind of the thing that scares us, right? So, and the Titans could also put him in a really bad position, right? Because it's going to be hard to play quarterback in Tennessee. So. Next up, at the 306, I ended up going with Kansas State running back DJ Giddens. Also going to the Tennessee Titans. A lot of Titans skill position players this draft. So he goes in the 5th round. There's a lot to like with DJ Giddens for sure. And then there's also a few lows as well. So as far as Tennessee goes, he's going to be running behind Tony Pollard, at least for this next season. I don't see him taking that backfield from him. I know that they got Tajay Spears, too, that they kind of like as far as a pass-catching guy. So, you know, you're really taking a swing on this guy, hoping that the futures for the other 2 players mentioned aren't going to be long-term in Tennessee. So, things that I like about him, I mean, we saw great vision and run IQ from him. You know, pretty agile dude as well for somebody that – I think he's, how big is he? Like 6'1"? 6 foot?
6'1",
yeah.
10.
Yeah, so he's going to be a really good receiving back at the next level, I think. But he's got some flaws, right? His contact balance isn't really going to be anything to write home about. And the long speed, we definitely see him get caught up on, especially if he breaks a 20-yard run, he's probably going to get caught. So he's not going to be housing too many long runs. But, I mean, if you look at the production at Kansas State, he's one of the reasons why they're a ranked team for the past 2 seasons, right? Over 1,200 yards in the past 2 seasons with at least 7 rushing touchdowns on top of that. 250 receiving yards as well to pair up with that. And another thing we really like, you know, we saw this with Dylan Lobby last year. Fumbles can quickly, especially if you're a 5th or 6th round guy, you fumble the ball a couple times. We saw it with Carson Steele as well. If you fumble the ball a couple times, you're going to not be playing on the team much longer. Or just you get your opportunities taken from you. So he's only had 3 career fumbles and over 500 rush attempts. That's really good. So, you know, the quickest way to get taken out of an NFL backfield is fumbling the ball. I don't think he's going to do that at the next level. So
Yeah, and to add on to what you were saying, as far as his, so he has very good burst and acceleration, very good vision. He marries that with good lateral agility. His change of direction is incredible, and he marries that with patience and vision to be extremely versatile in terms of his fit in an NFL offense. Like you said, the long speed just is not there, so you're not going to see 70-yard touchdowns. Just being frank with you. But he is very good at consistently maximizing yardage. I think that if he were able to assert himself, rather, uh, eventually, potentially, next season, or if there is an injury to Pollard, who I believe is going to be 28, and I think they can get out of his contract after this season. And Tajay Spears hasn't been the most durable guy either. I do think that there is some potential for him to get some work and just not let up. But this is one of those guys, like you mentioned, that the path to production just isn't as clear as like some of these other guys that we've seen earlier. And that's along with, him lacking the long speed and probably the draft capital is going to be one of the bigger reasons why he's not higher up in these rankings.
All right, so at the 307.
So at the 307, I ended up going with Xavier Restrepo. Um, so he's out of the U, and you might be thinking, third round wide receiver? What is he doing going at the end of our third round mock? Well, there's a myriad of things to be honest with you. He goes to the Bears here. Now the Bears, with Keenan Allen presumably leaving, right? He was on that 1 year deal. They need a slot receiver. Rome could definitely be a big slot. He's probably better in terms of who they have at receiver. Probably best used as their X. DJ Moore can be an X as well. Probably best as a Z slot. And so Restrepo would be a good fit in the offense. It's just uh, they have so many players around. I mean, in this mock, for instance, we had them getting Quinshon Judkins, who, he's a decent receiving back. He has very soft hands. He can be used vertically down the field, too. You have Rome, like I said. You have DJ Moore. You even have Cole Kmet. So, the playmakers are bountiful there. And so I really think the volume just would not be there for him. So the landing spot, while he does have Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson, which we are both high on the hire as well as the quarterback himself, the opportunity, just being real with you, is probably not going to be there. So he's going to be a low ceiling, low floor type of player in this specific circumstance. Now, is he particularly good at any one thing? No, but he is a dog. He'll do anything it takes to get the job done at the NFL level. He did in college. Uh, he's also not really going to be more than a slot. He's honestly just not the athlete that some of these other guys are, and the size is going to be an issue as well, we think. He has very good release packages, but his releases are really more so going to be effective against off coverage, which is why I think playing in the slot is going to work to his advantage there. I don't think that he is that guy on the boundary that you think is going to be beating press man coverage, and I don't think he's going to be stacking vertically like that. And so, but in the open field, he is relatively shifty, so we do like that. It's just he is a more limited player, and in this circumstance, in a relatively poor spot for total volume, as well as just the ceiling and floor being a little bit lower. He's also a fifth year senior, but when he was given the requisite volume, he did ball out, to be fair. So he had at least 69 receptions, 1,102 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns in each of the past 2 seasons, including 11 receiving touchdowns this past season. And he only had 2 drops this year. And one other thing, though, is he had no production until his 4th year in college. And so late breakout wide receivers, that is a giant red flag. We see it time and time again that typically if it takes you being, 22 years old or 23, 24 to dominate against 18-year-old freshmen, it just isn't the best. But once again, I think he's very good at many things, but potentially not elite at any one thing. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, just a jack of all trades, this guy for sure. He was the all-time leading receiver at Miami, which is kind of weird considering how many good wide receivers have came from that school as of late. So yeah, with him, I think he's way too limited as far as an athlete. I mean, he might score really well at the combine. It's just on the football field, he definitely is twitchy. It just doesn't end up leading to anything. So I think he's going to be on the NFL roster for sure, and he'll probably be in the NFL for a long time, just because he's just a really great worker, can really just add work ethic to a team, and he kind of reminds me of Jalen Watson on the Chiefs. Just a guy that's going to be on a roster, know the playbook, smart, and just be a contributor on any team that he plays for. May not be a big contributor, but he will be a contributor for sure. So at the 308 for me, I go Brashard Smith, a running back out of SMU. Have him going 4th round to the Washington Commanders. So I think that's a great landing spot for him because they don't really have. I mean, they have Brian Robinson Jr. as kind of like their pseudo pass catcher along with Eckler. But this guy, he's a converted wide receiver. Even though he didn't produce much as a wide receiver, once they got him to running back, he really started to put some stuff together, man. He really did. So there's some things to not like first and foremost. I think, his contact balance and physicality, you can see just from the picture here, he's kind of a skinnier, lanky guy. He's not really going to be running people over at all. And he gets tackled fairly easily. Now, he's not really fast or a great accelerator either. He's a little undersized, about 195, 200 pounds-ish, at 5'10". So what do we like about him? Because so far I've only said negatives. The things that I do like about him, like I said, he probably has the best hands of anybody in this class. I know we said Cam Scatterbo had the most receiving yards as a receiver, as a running back. But with this guy, I mean, he shows all of the route running that you would want, right? So he was a converted wide receiver, so he's going to have great hands. And I think this guy's going to have a high floor because I think he will go to an offense in the NFL and contribute on third downs, kind of like how Justice Hill is for the Ravens or Kenneth Gainwell is for the Eagles. Just your prototypical third down back that, he probably only gets 3 or 4 carries a game, if that, but he might get 6, 7 catches in one game. And with the Washington Commanders, how they run their offense, there's some games where Austin Eckler had like 12 targets, if not more. So he could definitely he could fill that role of the Austin Eckler kind of type. They're kind of different runners, but as far as getting the passing volume from him, he could definitely step in and do that relatively early. So I definitely see that at the next level, and I think he's going to be a safe play as far as longevity in the NFL to give you fantasy points. We don't know how many fantasy points, but he will get you some. As far as production, like I said, he didn't have very many receiving yards. I think it was a max of like 300 of any season as a receiver. But once he was converted to running back, this is his first year as a running back, he had 1,300 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns. Right? So he also had 337 receiving yards as a senior, which is more than he ever had as a wide receiver. So it's a definitely interesting production profile. So, yeah, I think at the next level he'll be a third down back. I don't think he's going to be getting 15-plus carries ever in a single game.
Yeah, so, as far as his build goes, he's, supposed to be 5'10", 196, which, if true, would only be a 28.1 BMI, similar to that of Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey, I believe, was 28.2. So, not going to, like you said, be your bell cow back, which is part of the reason why he's, way down here in the rankings. I will say, though, he has tremendous vision and just feel for space, which, the feel for space part and vision, there are some aspects of being a receiver where that happens with a lot of players. But it definitely translated to being a running back for him. You don't just walk into 1,300 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns as a converted receiver to running back. And Yeah, like, and the change of direction is also quite good. So I definitely think that, like you were saying, he could fill that Austin Eckler role while they're obviously not the same player stylistically per se. He does have the requisite skills to excel in this offense. Um, like you said, the upside, just because he's probably not going to be used on the goal line that much and should not be getting bell cow usage, probably is a little bit lower, as well as the floor. They're making no mistake. If he were to go to the Commanders in the fourth round, there is some upside. We've seen it in that Eckler role. And he, for for being a converted player in college, he is a relatively good runner of the football. And I do think that's going to translate to the NFL. It's just, once again, I don't think the volume is going to be quite as good as you would hope.
Yeah, for sure. So at the 309, who you got?
All right, so the 309, we have Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. Now, like you said earlier, this is a lot of people's, out of at least out of Iowa State. They're wide receiver one. Um, there are definitely things to like about him. In this mock draft, we have him going in the third round to the Giants. Now, what do we like about this? Well, obviously they do have Malik Neighbors, so he's not going to be the wide receiver one. We don't like that. But besides Malik Neighbors, they really don't have a number two per se. Theo Johnson, who I did like coming out and did show some flashes as a rookie tight end, did suffer an ACL tear. Is he the same player? Probably not going to come back right away as the same player we saw. So he definitely, and they have Wan'Dale Robinson. Darius Slayton's a free agent. Uh, they have Jalen Hyatt as field stretching vertical X that's extremely limited. So as far as besides Malik Neighbors, they don't have a number two, so he definitely could see some volume here. The only other thing we don't particularly like is that, well, once again, we don't want anyone to fail. We're just not the biggest believers in Shedeur Sanders and his upside. And so, also in a day ball offense, did you notice anything about Malik Neighbors? Well, when he stepped foot on the field, he was instantly one of the most targeted receivers we've ever seen. In fact, he almost would have had 200 targets if he would have played all 17 games this season. So, do we think that Jaden Higgins is really going to be taking away too many targets from Malik Neighbors? I don't think so. So that is one thing that we don't per se like as much about the landing spot. Not per se anything wrong with Higgins, but what do we think about him specifically? Well, he is your throwback X wide receiver. I don't think. While most receivers, I think, could be really, really good in the slot too if they're an X. Generally, that's not necessarily true, but I think a lot of X receivers could also fit in the slot. I don't think he's going to be taking much slot work because, first of all, Wan'Dale Robinson is very limited and specific to the slot generally. And then Malik Neighbors is also going to be utilized in the slot, so I think he's going to be limited to the outside. And as we've said a couple times in this video, your X style wide receivers, boundary receivers, it's the worst profile. So that combined with the pairing with Shedeur Sanders and also having Malik Neighbors there is definitely not working to his advantage. In fact, he played 70% of the time out wide and 29% of the time in the slot. But the thing is, he's not a particularly great route runner, and he's not very fast, and he's a relatively slow accelerator. And so separation is just not going to be a thing. To be fair, he's also, give or take, 6'4", 215 pounds. And so, you wouldn't expect somebody with that size generally to be an incredible separator per se. But the thing is, if he's not going to be that type of receiver, you need to have really good hands, and he has fantastic hands. Now, I don't want to understate how great his hands are. They are fantastic. In contested catch situations, you're probably not going to you're not going to stop him from catching the ball. He's going to come down with it pretty much every time. It's just also that he doesn't really offer very much after the catch. He's, once again, slower kind of guy, but just kind of really big with really good hands. And honestly, that's just not the profile that I typically yearn for in my fantasy drafts. Once again, I don't mean that as an insult to him. It's just historically true based on the data in which we've sifted through which is 10 years of data. As far as his production though, there was progressive growth every year, and we do like that a lot. He is a late declare with wide receivers specifically. That is a giant red flag. Just being fair. Um, but to be fair to him, also he had 87 receptions, 1185 yards, and 9 touchdowns as a senior, and throughout 350 targets in his collegiate career, he only had 7 drops. That goes to show you how good his hands are. And he had at least, and I mean at least, a 50% contested catch rate every single year of his collegiate career. This guy is going to be a very good possession receiver at the NFL level. It's just, I think that he's more of a limited player, and we typically like more well rounded players. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I haven't brought up the word project yet for any sort of player yet. I think that's what this player is. Obviously, at the NFL level, you're wanting to throw to open receivers, right? You don't want to throw turnovers, right, on contested jump balls, usually what you see in the NFL, right? So, with him, that's mainly his only strength. I think this guy, if somebody can get him, like Dayball or whoever the offensive coordinator is going to be, and they can refine his route running to make him cut in and out a little bit better, I can see him, now this is a stretch, but seeing him with like a T. Higgins type upside, like a really good possession receiver at the next level. But he definitely needs some refinement as far as the route running goes, because I don't see Shadur Sanders, maybe he will, but I don't see whoever the quarterback in New York just taking flyers on him with no separation, because he will not have separation at the next level if he doesn't work on his releases and his route running for sure. So I think you see him as more of a project player for sure. But he does have good upside if he can put it all together. So
Our final pick?
Yep, final pick. So final pick, we have Ty Felton out of Maryland. So we have him going 4th round to the New Orleans Saints. So what do we like about Ty Felton? First and foremost, he's got that kind of interesting X slot type of receiver where he's going to be playing outside the majority of the time, so he'll probably be a vertical X, so that's why he's down here in the 3rd round. But he can play Z if he needs to. We saw a lot of really great route running as far as when it comes to short and intermediate. Like his hitches were pretty good. His out route was pretty good. We saw him on shallow crosses a lot. Stuff like that. We thought his release packages were really good as well. And he's got pretty solid speed and acceleration too. I forget how big this guy was, but he's really good after the catch as well. He's not really what you'd say like a jump ball kind of guy, but we see him a lot. I see a lot of George Pickens in him if you took away the contested catch ability, which if you kind of think about it like that, maybe not the type of guy you want to draft, but there's some upside for him for sure. I think he's a better short route runner than George Pickens. Maybe a better route runner in general than George Pickens. I'm not too high on George Pickens' route running, but he's been progressing as a player throughout his collegiate journey for sure. So he is a true senior, so he's a 4th-year guy. Over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns as a senior, though. So he did have 8 drops, which is kind of concerning. So he did have some drops as a senior. Not a very good contested catch rate, sub 40%. And it's just, he's got a lot of limitations. And I think he's another one of those projects, right? If I would have repicked this, I think a guy like Kyle Williams would probably be going here. I like him a little bit more here. But, we made this whenever we didn't have everybody scouted just yet. Kyle Williams is kind of under the radar. So I might have gone Kyle Williams here instead. But Ty Felton, if he puts some of his skills together at the next level, he can definitely have some upside, right? I mentioned George Pickens as the comp. But he's just not going to win these contested catch situations, I don't think.
Yeah, like we were saying, project receiver, and in regards to the landing spot, obviously you have Chris Olave there, right? There's an opportunity for him to get on the field. It's just probably not going to be the one. He is a little bit of a project, and the quarterback situation is giant question mark.
Yeah.
And with them being negative 50 million in cap space and still paying players like Jameis Winston, Marshawn Lattimore, Michael Thomas rather,
Yeah.
uh, not a great situation.
No, for sure.
But he definitely has some upside, like you said.
For sure.
All right, so you saw, here you have the full list of players that we did. Like he mentioned earlier, we were in the process of grading all the prospects, right, when we made this video because we were trying to get it out before the combine happens, before we have official, numbers and measurements for everybody, and we've been working hard grading players. And so, there were a couple players that we do think that probably would have made this list and are probably going to be drafted that we just didn't have here because we hadn't graded them at the time. So I'll go first with the player that I think should definitely be considered here, and that is RJ Harvey out of UCF. So one negative thing is he does like to bounce runs to the outside quite a bit. That is an issue. Now, one thing is he's rather successful at doing so, so it's not as if he doesn't have the lateral agility to do so. He also is ridiculous in one-on-one situations. His lateral agility is just about unmatched. He has a nasty jump cut, a great feel for open space. Uh, I'm going to save the comp for the prospect profile video that is going to be released soon on him. But I will say he is an incredibly talented player, and he had 22 rushing touchdowns and over 1,400 rushing yards, I believe, this season. This guy is a very underrated player at the collegiate level, and I do think that he should be creeping up at draft boards, especially if the athleticism checks out. Anybody you
Yeah.
want to mention?
Yeah. So many guys I want to mention because we've graded so many prospects since then. I think the guy that I would put in here out of the quarterback position would be Kyle McCord out of Syracuse, Ohio State transfer. I mean, is your video out on Kyle McCord yet? Yeah.
Yes, it is, and
Okay. So they know
it'll
that
be
he's our QB too, right?
well, I didn't mention where he was, but we are probably higher on him than most. But if
He's
people
so good, man.
are if people are really low on him, it is because they did not watch the film. If
Yeah.
they watch the film,
They saw
they're
the
gonna
12
like him.
picks and were like, no, not for me. Look, for me, I think Kyle McCord is the most talented, mixed with talent and confidence of any receiver, any quarterback rather, in this entire class. I see so much Baker Mayfield in this guy. Which some people are low on Baker Mayfield. We both love Baker Mayfield. This kid has got, in far of my opinion, I think he's got the best arm talent of any quarterback in the class. Can make every single throw on the field pretty much effortlessly. Has some issues from time to time, getting fooled by full coverage, stuff like that. He will throw anticipatory throws that do get jumped from time to time. That's where those 12 picks come from. We didn't see too many like terrible interceptions. There were some, but he threw like 36 touchdowns or something. Led the nation in passing yards as well at Syracuse. This guy is absolutely insane, and we definitely should have him on there. Some other guys that I think missed the mark, like Kyle Monangai out of Rutgers. Woody Marks probably should be in here. Damian Martinez. Kyle Williams.
And so we hope you enjoyed the video. Put a good amount of time into this. Like we said, we hadn't graded everybody, so we did the best with what we could to try to make sure that, at least pre-combine, that we gave you guys, at least potential landing spots for some of these prospects that, based on what we've seen in terms of reports, just, landing spots that make sense for some of these guys, what you might be able to project, and where these guys, if these landing spots do end up happening, where they're probably going to be going for you. So, if you like what you've seen and heard, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a great and free, easy way to support the channel, and we'd really appreciate it. And once again, thank you for watching.